Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining, and welcome to our webinar today with the Kloia and Searchlight consulting teams, getting started with your modernisation journey and some key considerations. For those of you that are joining us today, the participants will be on mute throughout the call, but there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. For those of you that are joining us as well and attendees today, we're offering a free 2-hour workshop to help you get started. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the other end of the webinar. So on the screen at the moment, we've got today's panel. There are 3 of us today. I'll start at home with myself. I'm Graham Bateman. I'm a member of the Searchlight Consulting team, Transformation Director. I've spent just under 30 years in the industry, delivering advisory, change and change capabilities to a whole range of industries, typically around ERP programs and business change initiatives, but not exclusively. I'm joined today by my colleague, Jacob, who's a senior consultant with Searchlight. He's got a little over 15 years of experience in transformation and technology, MA integration, and he's a great enterprise architect and currently working for us on a global implementation. So he brings a lot of insight to today's conversation. And of course, we've got Dorian from Kloia, who's a founder. He's an AWS ambassador, a platform engineering ambassador as well. And he's been in the industry a little over 20 years. So between us, we will pose and field a number of questions today, which we hope you will find insightful. We'll try and make it flow as naturally as possible within the webinar. And if you have any questions, please do raise them as we go along. So the first question I'm actually going to pose to myself, and I will ask my colleagues if they'd like to chip in to do so as we go. So what is the best way to get started with a modernisation initiative? And there are a few key things, foundational elements we always consider. So right at the outset, be clear and identify what it is, what your opportunities and outcomes are that you want to achieve. What capabilities are you looking to establish within your modernisation initiative or uplift perhaps as part of your journey? Be clear on that from the beginning. Assess your current landscape. So what are your challenges and gaps at the moment? Do you understand where you are within your current digital landscape? And if you're not clear, if it's just a feeling, then undertake a discovery and get to grips with it, engaging the right architects and stakeholders from around the business. That probably sounds obvious, but setting that foundation gives you a really strong footing to move forward for the other things that you need to consider. Focus is all around maintaining scope. There is always a tendency with these journeys and initiatives for scope to expand. Don't try and boil the ocean, as the phrase goes. So get a clear idea of your scope, constrain it, and work on a journey to deliver that scope. And if you do that, we found that to be really, really successful. And as part of that, as understanding your scope, build a roadmap so that you can outline where along that roadmap you want certain things to be delivered, and try your best to stick to it. Again, it's about constraining what you're doing as you move forward. And what we found with clients is if they've got a clear roadmap, they do tend to stick to it and they don't veer off and go down cul-de-sacs and things that don't add value. Ownership is all about sponsorship. For those of you that deliver technology change programs of any variety, you'll know how important clear sponsorship, active, proactive sponsorship is. Get that in place, engage with your stakeholders, and hold people to account. And all of that will support you in coming together with your objectives, the opportunities and capabilities you want to do to help you to build your business case, which is ultimately the foundation for the start of your modernisation journey. Gents, would you like to add anything to what I just said?
I might add a point here. I think number 6, the case is the ultimate like early trophy, right? So the modernization really doesn't kick off without the case. And I think all the 5 items that you would expect as part of a process is to land the case. So I think Dorian would agree that what we are trying to do with our clients is to apply that framework model, and without having to spend months very quickly get to the realization of that case. And I think, without that, which we will talk about in the next question, in the next slides, is that you see a few false starts or illusions of having an end state, or lack of strategic transformation thereof. So I think my takeaway in all this is that we do this because without the case, there is no way forward.
I think that's a really
that marks the kickoff for any modernization.
Yeah, particularly for enterprise transitions, like modernization makes sense because we always have a large portfolio of applications and systems. Needs to define business case for this such type of transformation. Yes.
Thank you, gents. Okay, let's have a look at the next question. So, Jacob, if I pose this one to you, can you offer any key points for organisations about what they should consider when looking to build their business case then for a modernisation journey?
Yes, I think I don't like to generalize because each case is specific, but usually like there are two or three prominent cases where you are summoned and you start interacting with the business, and you spot 2 trends. One is you see a great deal of inertia, and you notice that there isn't a lot going on for the size of that business, right? Which means that the business is probably coming from a disadvantageous state, in an underinvested state, or the business thinks that they are transforming because there's so much going on, right? But ultimately, I think the question that I ask, irrespective of these 2 scenarios, an inertia or a piecemeal, busy, on the surface transformation state, is why are you doing this? Do you have a target state in mind? And do you have a roadmap? So in the previous slide, like part of these 5 steps is because if these don't exist, then either you've been off to a false start or you haven't really defined a transformative state. So it's either, either way, it's a delivery problem. So I think the real question is you need to have a strategic direction, and there are a few acid tests to understand if you have this in place. So that would be the first item that I would bring up. So the second one is obviously when you are looking into the transformation options, the best way to understand the current state as part of our early assessment is to look into the applications layer. So, I mean, I'm biased because I'm an enterprise architect, and pretty much all the conventional and contemporary approaches tell us to start from there. But I think there's a catch, because applications layer, and I've iterated on this many times over, during this conversation, that it is the best way to understand your way into people, the business side of things, the process side of things, because applications reflect the logical layers as to how you get on about doing your everyday business. And also it gives you a good hint about how things are at the infrastructure level. So the risk of trying to not focus on the applications and to go to the business people directly or to the application teams is that they have different incentives, right? An application owner will be focused on different KPIs. Is my application up and running? Is the business, okay with it? And then fine. The business will be, can I deliver what I'm supposed to do and meet my targets with these tools? Yes. But along the lines, you will notice that there's going to be a lot of pain points, a lot of missed opportunities. The application will be probably out of date, and the IT teams are going to be a little bit disengaged. So I think we always start with looking into the applications layer to really understand the transformational elements and work our way up and down, up to the business and the process and down to the infrastructure. And between these two, we try to come up with some sort of a doctor-patient relationship. We want to establish that with the business. So we are really chasing the symptoms, the opportunities, and the future prospect of the patient. So I think establishing that, looking into the applications is a healthy way. Upfront, you are setting that element of you need to tell us so we can help you kind of an element, rather than trying to have the IT teams, or if you like dominant business functions, try to solutionize things, because chances are they have started doing that, it hasn't worked, and that's why we are there.
I think that's a really
And
good point. Well made, Jacob. Yeah.
The other item is, and I love, because you touch on this a lot of times, that when you are trying to build a business case, it's not a write-up exercise. You need to work your way by working up these opportunities, define the solution spaces where you believe you can fit these benefits, and you turn this into a collaboration exercise. So as consultants, it's not our job to create 17 like sections, 300 pages of a smart write-up so you can shelf it. I think what we moved on as a practice is to try to make this a process by adopting contemporary innovation management techniques. So we really try to stimulate all these opportunities, pain points, and we ask people to be creative in terms of remove all these constraints, tell us where you could be if technology wasn't a problem, if process wasn't a problem. And then we try to come up with rapid ideation techniques. And what you end up seeing is not pages and pages of smart business narratives, but tangible user stories with formulas that you discuss. And ideally, you bring those up and you slash them, right? Again, with the same themes, you pitch to one another. And if you're lucky, you'll come up with 300 ideas, for example. But in an ideal world, the corporate bandwidth will not allow all this to be realized. So you'll be settling for 100 in the end. And if those 100 are giving you enough coverage on the solution spaces for modernization, then you may have a wide-scale ERP transformation. Or you can have a clustering exercise where it tells you to don't change everything, focus on your virtual storefront and e-commerce capabilities, because that's where most of the benefits appear to be adding up. So again, it is a process. Everything we do is a process. And I think trying to approach the transformation not as a big kind of a big reveal, a lot of smart write-up done in isolation. If you bring it to a collaboration business facilitated exercise, then it becomes a framework, not something that you shelf, but something that you can pick up even 1 year into your transformation, revisit what did we say about this supply chain area that we would do, and you will have a page with all these formulas rather than trying to understand all that narrative. So I think if I am to summarize, you might not be on a strategic direction if you haven't been off to a good start. So we ask these questions. You need to understand where the business is interacting with processes and people and the technology, which is applications and your capabilities. And also, when you are building the case, it is a process. It's not a write-up. It's not something that a consultant or someone or a single team in the business will do for you. But then everything will come at a cost, right? So you will have an envelope of potential promises to the business. And if you're lucky, then you will be on a shopping spree, right? So you need to spend that money to realize those benefits. And I think on the cost elements, Graham, Dorian, I'll be looking into you because you've been doing this for quite a few years, right? Whereas I'm on the technology side trying to define the end state. You are more on the delivery side and assurance side, and cost is king.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I'd say on that, and to the first bullet under the cost there, most organisations have some level of cloud in their IT infrastructure these days, and may well be already aware of it. But there's been a shift over the years that I've been in the industry, from mostly capex projects to obviously in the cloud world more opex related projects. So that's something you need to be sharing and open with your finance stakeholders if they're not already aware. And we talk about cost needing to be related to end-to-end business processes as well. So don't just think about a siloed application. Think about the process and all of the applications that it touches, and make sure it's all encompassing. And then the final point there is think about your business case in terms of, you've obviously got your initial implementation costs, but then think about the lifetime of the service and everything you need from the service. Make sure you get all of the costs that are relevant to what you're doing, and you don't miss anything. Otherwise you get nasty surprises and annoyed senior stakeholders down the line. That's what I'd say. Dorian, do you want to add anything to that from your own experience?
Yes, we'll go deeper in that topic soon, but I agree that we have a traditional way of investing on hardware of software, licensed software, which now turns into more like, rather than having it as an asset, but more like a renting it, like monthly subscription based. So it's a big shift as someone who is managing an IT budget, but on the other side, rapidly changing technology. Consider you are investing in a hardware. So let's consider its end of life is like 4 years, 5 years. You have to stick with it, right? So, but in OpEx model, you have the freedom to change it to a new technology. So that's the good part of shifting it to capex to opex. Of course, pros and cons, but the cloud model, we mostly embrace OpEx model, yes.
Yeah.
Dorian, I have a question that I'm sure you will answer, but oftentimes the kind of concerns that we are hearing is that even in the OpEx heavy model, there's a lot of emphasis on trying to build cases based on licenses, but these services have evolved. So there are plenty of capacity utilizations, different capacities. So a lot of variable OpEx costs that also drive up some of these, cases. And a lot of the CFOs, they are trying to be a little bit more cautious about, OpEx is better for me because CapEx is. I think they're trying to understand that even in the OpEx world, even with this flexibility, there may be some bad surprises. And I'd like you to put a pin on that, because when you cover the cost elements, you'll be talking a lot about the optimization. But I think more and more we're seeing upfront requests from C-levels on pre-optimization. So we don't promise a certain set of KPIs based on certain utilization and come up with an annual spend. I think but they are also getting more proactively involved in the pitfalls of and all the benefits of OpEx, because if you're not optimized, you can start bleeding a lot of money in that model too. We like the OpEx model, obviously we're championing it, but I think it's also a good thing that C-level now understands that what they will see on the Excel might not necessarily relate to what they will get on the bill.
Yeah, first of all, I think CTOs have the freedom also to mix CAPEX and OPEX. How? Because most of the cloud providers are also allowing you to bring your own licenses, which is called BYOL model. It's not for all type of your applications, but the fundamental like databases or like some particular licenses that you are already using or you already invested on-prem can be also utilized on cloud. That's so they have the freedom to mix, of course, yeah. But on the other side, without committing to a long-term, without giving a long-term commitment, because you never know that the utilization will go up and down based on the business or based on the technology changes. So you may still have the freedom not to make long-term commitments. But if you are sure about your business stability, or you foresee how it will be upcoming years, committing it brings you additional cost benefits. Why? Because most cloud providers like you to commit to give you better discounts for long-term commitments. But it's totally up to CTO and CFO. So they have the freedom to give commitments partly or fully, use some of their licenses, like as bring their licenses on cloud. So there are different options, that difference of flexibility, which means another level of course complex. Let's don't call it complexity, but you have to manage all of those which were more straightforward, like before, just you have an on-prem and your servers and licensing, that's all. But now you have to manage
just being cited on these potential programs and incentives for end user organizations is a lot. I think that's where Kloia, yourselves, you are doing a lot of this hand holding on things that exist that the end user organizations might not know about. And I'm pleasantly surprised to see that even this late into the post-cloud era, there's plenty of programs still to incentivize migrating clients from on-prem systems to cloud technologies. There is still a lot of good programs, good incentives, freebies out there. So
yeah, before the journey, as you said, we do optimization and licensing assessments, so which is also called OLA, which means that we first, before moving to a cloud or modernization journey, you need to an organization needs to know if the licensing needs to be optimized. Let's consider you have Windows, Microsoft licenses, like Oracle or database licenses, doesn't matter. But before your cloud journey, we first sit down with our customers and try to understand what is their targets and what type of capacity they need on cloud, and to optimize the licenses, because on-prem environments most of the time may not be optimized, because on cloud you have to optimize because it's pay as you go, right? But on-prem it's not pay as you go, so you just have the electricity bill, I guess. And so that's why on-premise environment, the optimization is not just the priority, but on cloud. On the other side, if you optimize and move to cloud, obviously it will save a lot of costs.
Okay, guys, I'll jump in just on very briefly on the last point, and then we'll move on. Then, so we talked a lot there about the business case and some key points and considerations for the people that are listening. And at the bottom there, we talk about making sure that we consider benefits in all their guises, but also linked to key business capabilities, be they tangible or intangible. Do either of you have a good example of where you've perhaps helped a customer identify business capabilities in their business case?
do you want to start?
Yeah, you can go ahead if you wish.
Sure. I think looking from a process re-engineering or process innovation point of view, when you've done the business ideation across the solution spaces with functions, trying to understand, there are capabilities hidden in the sense that the business wants to improve their investment footprint, but technology is a concern. For example, we're seeing this a lot in the supply chain, right? So a lot of the modernization initiatives are falling victim to data availability, and I think one of the biggest prominent cases that I can recall from one of our latest assignment is that a single direct material input, right, on a material that more than 10 plants were consuming, the supply chain managers didn't have visibility on the local pricing because all these businesses were operating in 10 different installations of the same ERP. So imagine, as your biggest cost input, you are trying to understand the price sensitivity, utilization and all these things, your raw material inventory turnaround rates, and as a supply chain manager, you are trying to govern this, but the data is in 10 systems and in one silo. So it was fascinating to see how much, by removing that 10 ERP and replacing it with a real-time global ERP, we were able to add 2-3% of an optimization in certain levers, and that alone played such a big play in the case that I think if we could just bring that to the business, that would have been like a winner in itself. Of course, we didn't stop there because there's a lazy way of doing it, right? So because that's very dangerous when you're trying to build a case, you don't want to focus on a single thing, because there are cost opportunities with not doing this exercise properly. But I recall that as an outlier, that probably 5 to 10% of the business uplift benefits were to come from just unifying the supply chain visibility in a single cloud system, rather than to adapt with a lot of data platforms trying to get the data. So I can recall that one. Just by switching the technology into a global one, you had the potential in the procurement aspect on supply chain on such a big a cost driver. So there are all these pockets of small and large drivers when you put your mind to it.
Okay, let's move to our next question. question 3. So, gents, how do you approach moving from legacy on-premise systems to a modern cloud-based architecture?
One quick summary. We talked a lot about why we would start with the applications layer and the importance on understanding the capabilities, pain points, and then work your way up into the case. So even with the right case, I think ultimately this is a sales pitch, right, to the C-level or from the C-level to the board. And I think if you've been through this iterative exercise of 5 stages or 6 stages, depending on the framework you apply, Kloia or Searchlight, like we approach this differently, but ultimately to get to the case, the case get presented to the authority with the envelope of money, right, potentially. And if you've made it that far, chances are the decision makers want to be sold into this idea. But then with all the science, all the hard facts, all the smart facts and everything you have, I think it comes down to the business driver. So is the business trying to do this out of excitement? Is there enough multi-level change appetite to do this? In which case you will have a very optimistic C-level trying to side with you, but it might not be the case, right? It might be forced upon the business because you might be exiting a region and you need to shift the capability from 2 plants to somewhere else, and you may be forced into uplifting the capabilities of different regions with outdated technology like machinery and all that stuff. So it may be a little bit stressful, right? Or it could be out of fear, right? It could very well be that with the recent regulations in a regulated industry, the type of data that you are dealing with might be subject to very, very high regulations with potential fines and everything, and this might be keeping the C-level and the board awake. So you really need to understand ultimately why you started doing this, why you started embarking on that journey, and try to bring all these cases and hard facts to the psychological element of we made it this far, right? Obviously we passed these few stages, but it's still a sales pitch. So I think when trying to pitch on-prem to cloud, set aside the technology because you've done your homework. The CTO looked into it, everybody looked into it. Ultimately, this is very much a psychological sell in the end. So I think that has been our experience, irrespective of how deep you go cloud from on-prem. It is still very much a big relationship sell to your board or to your C-level.
Thank you, Jacob.
What I can add as comment regarding this transformation is we have the options to position the target state as SaaS, like PaaS, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. We have different options, right? And we can see in the industry that several software vendors are switching to SaaS, which were supporting both on-prem and SaaS, but now we can see that even the major ones are now trying to decommission the on-prem licensing, like traditional licensing model, which means that more software products will be switching to SaaS more and more, which we get used to run them on-prem. One upside, maybe advantage to benefit from SaaS for regulated industries is you rely on the vendor as they have the necessary certifications for data encryption and for SOC 2 or ISO certifications, which you should normally comply as your organization if you are running the infrastructure, and that's not always as a financial. As an ex-employee of a bank, I can assure you that it's not easy to defend your infrastructure against auditors. So I would, at that time, while I was working in a financial industry, that there was not options for us for SaaS back in that time. But now I can see that the CTOs have options to position some of the software they are using on SaaS, some of them on-prem or IaaS or PaaS. So they have the options. So and as an advantage against PaaS and infrastructure ES, SaaS have the option for flexibility that you do not own the infrastructure. But that doesn't mean all of your software, regulated software or in-house software runs on SaaS. No, because it's your software, right? You have to run it on your cloud. So you have to deploy it on as a PaaS model or IaaS model. Anyway, PaaS model means that you may benefit some of the platform elements like database or like SDLC or let's say like repository as a PaaS, benefit from PaaS services and build your application on the top, right? You are still responsible for your data. Or you can go a bit, if you need more control, you can always have the infrastructure as a service option. So you control or you manage everything from the operating system level up to the application level. So this flexibility gives the CTOs to position how much headache they would like to get from auditors. So they can just keep it more narrow by using leveraging more SaaS. So it's up to the organizations how to find the balance between those.
Thank you,
speaking of balance, I think the reality is, even in a state where you champion and establish like cloud first, digital first, you'll be looking into a mixture of options, because in an ideal state, your core application can be transferred into SaaS, but that's never enough. You have a lot of proprietary solutions, certain workloads that you have built over the years that don't have a SaaS equivalent. So you need to plug those. You need to think about the enterprise layer around it. And the good news is all these things can be ported to platform as a service. Like you can convert, refactor this into microservices on platforms on AWS or Microsoft. But I think the challenge that we're seeing here is sometimes it is a tough sell, because when you put out a principle of SaaS first and digital first, there's always a few problematic elements that you need to do the old way. And I think the roadmap comes to your rescue in terms of trying to illustrate the complexity in a sequential manner. I think what I like about the roadmap views is that you kind of like take the business through the transformation journey without losing sight of the technological elements. That these 5 capabilities that we are able to get from the core ERP, your finance module, in our supply chain, for example, this will be on SaaS, right? The journey will start with this, but it could very well be that your warehouse management system or your shop floor software is not covered in the ERP, which is rarely the case. And you might have a different change journey. You might have a SaaS solution, but it might be too challenging to buy and integrate at the same time, right? And the business might be like, well, we're spending all this money, why can't we get everything at the same time? So I think once you go into the SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, conversations, it's not always a matter of flexibility. Sometimes you are forced into doing certain things on IaaS and PaaS because you need to sequence things, or some of these capabilities from these other functional areas are not represented in that SaaS or in a different SaaS. Or maybe there is a good SaaS solution, but you don't have the realistic timelines or the change window to implement it. So I think trying to get that technology roadmap element into the case in an understandable manner with the right gravitational points also helps, because there is again something that you can pull back from the shelf and think like, that's what we agreed on, right? We would start with this on SaaS, we would plug this in, because people will lose sight of it, right? For the untrained eye, for the business leaders, sometimes they can be a little bit agitated about why can't we get this at the same time? Why can't we get this on SaaS? Is there not a better product out there? And sometimes real life constraints will apply, because you'll be dealing with the business change windows too, in addition to how much is represented in the form of a commercial SaaS software to meet the capability that you own.
Some good points you considered there, gents. The last point that we make, no matter which technology platform or which cloud platform you go on, your modernization journey has to be underpinned by really solid delivery capability. And when we talk about delivery capability and assurance in the context of this question, we're talking about an arena I know very well, having come up through the project and program management route. So it's good governance, making sure that you've got the reporting and meeting cadence in place, solid processes, so that your whole team knows how they're all working together towards the delivery of your common goals that you've outlined at the beginning. Everybody needs to know the part they play as a part of the team, what they are responsible for. They need to take responsibility, and you need that good governance and oversight. And that stands for any of these initiatives, no matter what platform you use, be it an on-premise system, be it IaaS, SaaS, ERP, whatever it is. In order to deliver it properly and control delivery of it and meet your timelines and costs, it has to have this good sort of governance wrapper around it at all times. And that's something we at Searchlight in particular spend a lot of time advising and helping our customers with. Okay, gents, let's move on to the fourth question. So, how do you recommend assessing which cloud migration strategies are most appropriate? Jacob.
Okay, so under the assumption that your cloud journey has just begun, I think it's important to mention that irrespective of how much in-house talent you may have on your current landscape, start with the assumption that you are not cloud ready, which means you need to invest a lot of time in your early stage activities, especially before mobilizing in a program, to establish the architectural baseline and principles on how to operate in cloud. Okay, I'm not even talking about the other people aspect, the upskilling and all that stuff, but architectural baseline and principles. Now that you've selected a digital first environment, you'll be SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, and on-premise is going to be literally the black sheep, because you don't want to replicate some of the difficult to get out of kind of scenarios, right? And this may not be an easy change for your current talent pool. And that's why I'm saying that you are not cloud ready. And imagine all of your network traffic being consumed between your shop floor or office floor and the server next room. All of a sudden, with all these applications moving to cloud, you'll be dealing with a different set of readiness, and you're not going to be ready for that. Like your ISP considerations, your bandwidth, your cloud connectivity, kind of security layers that you may have added without any intervention to shield and out of that SQL server. You won't have this. You'll be exposed in the cloud. Yes, the SaaS providers will constantly patch the systems, but between your users and cloud, that is still very much your responsibility. So that exposes you to a different set of like network connectivity, identity management, security, licensing model kind of things that you haven't dealt with in the past. So you're not ready. So how can you help yourself? I think in a transformational settings, you will be interacting a lot with the business, because the business is paying a lot of this money. Yes, IT is a contributor to business case in terms of cost saving, but most of the benefits will come from the business stakeholders. So imagine 7 solution spaces like sales, finance, HR, IT is one of them, and it's going to contribute in terms of cost savings. But you'll be forced to having a lot of business-facing technology conversations throughout the program, and your current technical skills and the teams might not be enough to handle that. And I think top tip is, in a transformational setting, you may need to reinforce this by bringing enterprise and business architects. And usually they are best placed in helping you build the case, selecting the software, and once you have the case, in the pre-mobilization state, define the architectural baselines and principles that you will benefit from. So top tip is, you're probably not cloud ready on this journey, and you may need to reinforce your architectural skills and baselines by bringing in additional expertise.
And I'd just say that in my own experience, Jacob, running programs, that's absolutely been the case. Needing to have the right quality of architect with you at the beginning of the journey has been absolutely fundamental to making sure that we're successful as we move forward. So I completely back up what you just said then.
Yeah. So before Dorian gives us, a real life kind of a framework they apply over and over again, I think the other points to consider is you need to be very careful in the pre-mobilization state, and even before that, when you have the case, basically you are trusted with an envelope of money that you need to spend on the right tools, right? And assuming you've done your due diligence right, you should now have, again, another collaboration journey with the business users to go and select the right system. So the things that you should be watching out for is you need to have the governance in place ahead of the program mobilization. So you need to define the mechanisms. You need to understand the purpose of all the moving parts of the program, all the leads, all the streams and everybody. You need to put in place the communication capability and the right forums and authority, because the last thing you want is to constantly go to your program director for everything. You're going to have multiple streams. You're going to have like central teams like procurements, IT trying to help all these streams. So you need to define the governance in advance. Again, we talked about this. You need to understand where you are coming from, right? Your ecosystem and foundations are going to be with you. So you will either be a Google organization, a Microsoft organization, or an AWS organization, a combination of all these, but you will have a designation. And the moment you expose yourself to SaaS and PaaS, a lot of technologies outside of your premises, somewhere in the cloud, then identity management, security, and all these things, again, are going to be your responsibility. You need to tell the prospective participants, the bidders that are trying to sell their solutions to you upfront in the form of non-functional requirements, that we expect your solution to comply with ... identity management system that we have in Microsoft, because we're not changing that. That is our foundation. We want to build on it. If you don't do this, you'll have a difficult time trying to get that seamless IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and the end user kind of a end-to-end governance. So be mindful of your ecosystem realities. You might not be in a luxury position to change everything. You are changing everything around this. So I think that's important. And apply this to your selection criteria. Let people know about where you are coming from. Ask them these questions. We are a Microsoft organization. What should we expect? We have databases. We have data aggregation workloads on Azure, and we don't want to change that. Can we move your data from your system to our Azure? Do you have a connector? So ask these questions. And lastly, again, extensibility is an important element. Even with the best SaaS coverage, you will still need to move data. You will still need to integrate systems. So again, ask these questions like, do you have an enterprise bus, for example, around your ERP system that you can bring? So we can plug all these things that we cannot get from the ERP suite, right? So extensibility and integrations, again, the middleware and all these things that you might need to move to data analytics platforms, these will stay with you, okay? So as you go and add these SaaS vendors to your ecosystem realities, you need to make sure that these conversations are taking place. So again, these are part of frameworks that we apply at Searchlight, but I'll now turn to Dorian about how to make a decision about what to do, how to move an application workload to cloud. So I really like the 7R approach that you'll be talking about, but the scene is yours.
Thank you, Jacob. So on the top of what Jacob described, we call it 7 R's of cloud migration, which are rehost, relocate, replatform, refactor, repurchase, retire, and retain. 7 R's. The traditional way of cloud migrations were mostly focused on rehost previously. Some relocate, but mostly rehost, which is also considered as lift and shift migrations in the industry. Lately, we see more shift also to replatform. But what this framework tells us is there are other options, such as refactor. Refactoring your existing application is not always the case that we widely see in the industry. But on the other side, you may have legacy applications which pulls you behind and which may be costly, right, to run on cloud or any environment. So the refactoring, in contrast to maybe pre-AI era, lately we can see that the AI models also brings us great wide options to refactor our software, which was previously done hand by engineers, but now it's been accelerated. I'm not telling it's fully transformed, but it's we can see a shift that the refactoring I'm not talking about like major refactoring to microservices. I'm just referring to more version upgrades, such as like .NET version upgrades from to new versions, or to Java likewise. Those type of refactorings are currently can be handled also by AI, right? Repurchase also is an option, which can be considered for the software that or applications that we may need to change with the other options. Retire also I poorly see in the industry, because organizations may have some type of batch processes or simple applications, or sometimes complex applications, which does not have the value, does not provide the value which is expected, or does have a minimum, does not have a business value that's currently bringing to you. So those can be retired, right? So this should be always an option as well, to consider which of your applications can be retired. Or retain as it is. So those R's are what we consult to our customers during the initial migration planning and assessment phase to identify the portfolio. We are also using several internal and also external, let's say, portfolio analysis software as well. If there is a complex portfolio in some in the organization, such as like different technologies in-house or like external vendors, to identify those applications and find a roadmap for a cloud modernization journey. And thanks to AWS type of vendors, specifically I'm referring to AWS. Why? Because we work with AWS closely, and AWS and AWS ISVs, independent software vendors, have lately a wide spectrum of tools that you can benefit from while assessing, planning, even executing your migration. Those tools may play a role to provide you insights, or even may play a role to automate your migrations up to a level. Let's say automate your VMware to AWS, automate your Microsoft SQL to Postgres modernization, or automate your .NET version 4 to version 8 migration. So based on what you do, okay, it's just some examples. And thanks to AWS fundings, also those comes up with a with covered by AWS type of migrations, which accelerates the journey. And we, based on our customers, based on the use case, as Kloia, we are in a position to identify which of those tools make sense for this particular use case.
And Dorian, can I just double check what you just said there? So AWS will actually help fund some of this, will they?
Yes, that's right. I mean, without AWS, you have to create a budget, but together with AWS, AWS is generous to provide fundings for migrations and modernizations. Sometimes I also, if we look this from a financial perspective, it does not always make sense, but from engineering perspective, AWS also wants, what I can see is AWS also encourages the customers to modernize. Think about you modernize. It's like let's consider you have a old car which has high maintenance costs, right? So same for software. You may have a software which burns money, right? But AWS encourages you to change your car, change your software, which will burn less money. But AWS is okay with this, because AWS also wants the customers to modernize. So, and there are software vendors again, but a lot portfolio of a wide spectrum of software vendors, which we help our customers to choose the appropriate one, which makes sense for their use case and their technologies.
Thank you.
In that case, I think the key message to anyone who's listening is that I think embarking on a cloud transformation journey, especially you are to site with a big vendor, and you will, in most cases, the big household names, doing this or trying to do this with your own means might come at the expense of missing out on some of the incentives that they might access through Kloia or Searchlight or some other extended strategic partners, because these are insider programs. Sometimes they are incentivized based on certain partner statuses, which I know you are. You have quite a high tier with AWS. But again, so I deal with a lot of the retire and repurchase aspect, trying to do a lot of SaaS-based transformation, basically trying to do more with less. Instead of 75 applications on an application rationalization diagram, I'm trying to fit as much as I can into a better software. But obviously there is no escape from extending around it or plugging some other software. And when it comes to refactoring and the replatforming, I think one of my biggest takeaways from my interactions with Kloia was that even I wasn't aware of how far AWS came in terms of supporting some Microsoft workloads on the cloud that you would exclusively expect Azure to offer to you. But I was fascinated to understand that Kloia was doing a lot of Microsoft workloads and service migration on AWS from traditional Microsoft designated clients. So again, I think the key takeaway for all of us is that there's plenty of programs and incentives for any organization that wants to go about their cloud journey, but this can't come at the expense of missing out on the latest and greatest if there is not a good partner, hand holding the organization in the journey. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, we always like to accelerate and also support our customers in that journey. There are a lot of options, and once you try to investigate all options yourself, waste of time, right? We have been already in the industry implementing different type of option scenarios, and that's what we do, like the mostly accelerate the journey. That's all. I mean, accelerate the journey and bring in the business value sooner than expected.
Right. Thank you very much, gents. I think we've got a schematic, haven't we, on some of the strategies that that the people that are listening in can consider. Should we take a look at those?
So this diagram illustrates a bit more detail, like how in case we rehost, what two options we have, like automate or manual install, or in case of replatform, what is the next steps ahead of us, or in case of a repurchase, what's waiting us, like a SaaS model or licensing model or off the shelf model. Or in case of a re-architect, like refactoring, rewriting, what steps are waiting ahead of us. So it's like an illustration which helps the customers are aware of the options before moving forward.
That's really useful. Really useful. Right, our final question this evening. Cloud costs. Do you have any key tips for our audience to manage these effectively? And what should organizations watch out for?
I think that may be the most expected question when it comes to cloud nowadays, right? We have been also having incoming demand from our customers to optimize their cloud costs. We do it like regularly, monthly, and we have some in-house software or also like third-party software that we manage this. But I always say the cloud costs depends on the software, depends on software architecture, right? So if you use message queue, you have to pay for the message queue cost, right? If you are using more like a cache layer, you have to, you need to know that it comes with a cost, right? So the software architecture defines the costs. Not just software architecture, but software architecture in better words, like affects the cost, because whatever the elements in your software architecture, beginning from the programming language, beginning from the libraries that you are utilizing, you are benefiting from, or the which data technologies that you are utilizing affects the cost, right? And of course, you should be aware that the capacity and also the cost is varies on traffic utilization, on spikes, during spikes. So you should be aware of this change. But this is the good side of using cloud, because you don't have to make an initial investment for the worst case. So you can upscale, downscale, horizontally or vertically, right? And one other aspect is our customers are always willing to have high resilience. So there should be a level of like what type of resilience you need, up to what level, because high resilience means high cost also, right? And also continuously monitoring the consumption, continuously monitoring the waste is also what we do for our customers, for managed service customers, I mean. And apart from software architecture, apart from those traffic and capacity and resilience, we do consult organizations to embrace FinOps framework, which is governed by Linux Institute. So some visuals on the right hand side, but as a summary, it is the framework which helps organizations to embrace cost optimization, not just like a central department, but more like roles and spread across the organization and teams. And there are different maturity levels of FinOps. We do also consult to assess those levels, which you can see on the right bottom, like crawl, walk, run. So we do assess those, and we do together with Searchlight, we do those assessments to build a roadmap, how to shift from crawl to walk, how to shift from walk to run. So this is a framework where uplift organizations for FinOps. And lastly, there are architectural decisions which affects your cloud costs, whether up to which level to utilize serverless versus from which point you should switch to classical infrastructure, pros and cons, right? There are this is the decision should be given not always upfront, because cloud has the flexibility for you to shift between or change between those. Define your scaling policies. Agreeing the SLO, service level agreements, service level objectives, with the business, because this affects also the cost. As the service level objectives in acceptable levels, not always should be like tight levels, but depends on business or depends on business function. Maybe for a transactional business, you may have more tight SLOs, but let's say for a batch, you don't need, right? So you have to tune those SLOs. And also your data policy, your data retention policy, your master data policies affects also the cost. Or managed services, using a managed service database, or you manage the database yourself. Also depends on your engineering team, right? If you you may decide based on your engineering team capabilities, engineering skills, engineering capabilities, you may choose a strategy how much to benefit from managed services or like IaaS. So all of those affects your cloud costs, where we come into the point to provide you a comprehensive report and suggestions. What type of strategy you need to have depends on your software team or cloud team skills, and depends on, of course, your software architecture, depends on your resilience needs. We are in a position to provide you the roadmap and the features that you need on the cloud provider to keep the cost effectively.
Wow, that's an awful lot of information for people to absorb there, but some really good points that people can capitalize on if they take them into consideration. Obviously, Dorian, from your perspective, and Kloia and Jacob, I know from us from Searchlight, we welcome the opportunity to talk to anybody that's listening to this if they want to learn more about how they can look at the costs around their modernization program. Get in contact with us, and we'll help you and move things forward for you. So look, we're coming up on the hour, so let's do a quick recap of the things that we've touched on today, and some of the key takeaways. So we've touched on the key considerations when you're starting out in your modernisation journey, making sure you stay focused on why you're doing it. What the why is always important in any transformation initiative. Stay focused on it. Keep an eye on the prize. Stick to your goals and the capabilities and opportunities and the outcomes that you want. Solve those problems that you committed to your senior stakeholders. That in itself will help you to realise the benefits. Jacob, only the right technology roadmap will get you the transformation outcomes you want. We talk about that a lot, don't we? So that's key. Select the right tools for the right job. It's a mantra that's been true even before IT. The right tools, right technology will get you to the right place. Starting off on the right foundations, that very first slide, we went through it quite quickly, but a lot of those foundational elements that we need to get right, to build on, mobilize the right team with the right capabilities. As Jacob outlined quite clearly, it's amazing what we don't know when we set out on these modernisation journeys. So engage your architects early, get their feedback, and build that in so that you can develop your case. And lastly, and of interest to a lot of people, I'm sure, that are listening, as Dorian said, think about vendor incentives, accelerator programs that might be available, like the MAP program from AWS, the Migration Acceleration Program. And if you want to understand more about the whole FinOps piece, then reach out to Kloia or Searchlight, and we'd be delighted to help you. So we've actually run out of time, gentlemen. So I think that brings us neatly to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank everybody that is listening in or listens to this. If you are listening and attending, we will reach out to you to see if you'd like to avail yourselves of our complimentary 2-hour workshop to get you out of the blocks and learn a bit more about getting going on your modernisation journey. Other than that, from me, from Jacob and Dorian, we'd like to thank you for attending and wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.